Welcome to The Mandate, a show featuring intimate conversations about men's mental health, masculinity, and identity. We bring you stories to inspire you, experts to guide you, and the tools you need to become the man you truly want to be. It's time to sit back, relax, and open up. Live from the Mandate Studio in Austin, Texas, here's your host, Adam Hoffman.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to tonight's edition of The Mandate. I am joined by my new friend, Matt Zerker, and we've got so much good stuff to talk about. We were chit-chatting in the, I don't know what to call it, green room, I guess, backstage about what was going on. I was like, we should just turn the camera on and start going. So we got a lot of fun stuff that we're going to talk about today. But Matt is the founder and CEO of Tethr, which is a peer-enabled mental health and well-being platform for guys, but he definitely didn't start there. So prior to Tethr, he was a portfolio manager at a quantitative hedge fund, which sounds just a little bit stressful, but we'll find out. Had a lot of success earlier in his career, but found himself being deeply unhappy, something that I can certainly empathize with, as I'm sure a lot of you can as well. And then a very close friend unexpectedly died in 2018 that sent him spiraling into suicidal depression. But that also started his journey towards a more fulfilling life. So today we're going to jump into Matt's journey, talk a little bit about Tethr, and whatever else is going to come up today. So Matt, thanks for being here, man.
How are you, sir? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing well. I get to talk to you. I just, like I said, ate some chicken and was trying to figure out how to make Chick-fil-A sauce. So all in all, great evening, and it's about to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because like before we started all this, I really I didn't know like what I was supposed to wear for this. And like I like very seriously considered what I was supposed to be wearing for this. I was like, is this like more of a casual thing? Like, do we dress up? Am I supposed to do my hair? Should I go and like shower it up? And then you showed up with like a really nice collared shirt, and I was like, God damn, totally missed the vibe. Cause like I was like, oh, maybe this is like hoodie and backwards hat kind of thing. But anyway, you know, I was like, yeah, we're just gonna we'll bro out, and now I'm here and you look really good, and I'm just kind of wearing a sweater and a backwards hat. But we're gonna have fun. Nonetheless,
I think you look really good for whatever it's worth. I need to find out how to get one of those sweet Tethr hoodies. You can never have too many hoodies.
I'm gonna send you one right directly from my office / corporate headquarters / kitchen.
I mean, it sounds like a lot of magic gets made there, though, so that's great.
Absolutely, it does.
That is great. Well, how are you doing? I know you haven't had a chance to eat dinner yet, but how's your day? How have you been?
Yeah, no, it's been a wild kind of 3 months for us, and I've been kind of thinking a little bit about where I am right now, especially in this journey. And there's like a couple things that have happened. Like, I mean, we've crossed 3,500 downloads. We're in 500 startups, which is an SF-based tech accelerator, which is like a huge feather in our cap. We're working really hard on launching some programming. We're going to be launching a few other things in the next little while. And so it's a really exciting time, but it's a really like a heads down kind of like hands on the gears, laying piping, you know, building infrastructure type time. And so it's not that like sexy, you know what I mean? And it's not like, you know, I break up my days by doing like podcast interviews, clubhouses, stuff like that. This is what I really like. I love doing. Like, I love, you know, I grew up in a family that loved theater. I went to an arts high school here in Toronto. I acted very much. So like this stuff is a lot of fun for me, and like it really energizes me. And obviously, you know, I wouldn't be doing this unless I was truly in love with what I was building. And so getting to talk about it with people like you in this type of a forum is really like, it's a lot for me, and it's great. But it's interesting is that you go through this really interesting arc when you start a company. And I think, I mean, maybe I'll just talk about my own personal journey with it. But I think there has to be this time at which something switches from I'm doing this for validation to I'm doing this as an act of service, right? And I think, you know, in the mental health space, it very much so, you know, a lot of people are coming from that background where, you know, maybe they've been severely depressed, they've had crippling anxiety, they have PTSD. There's like, especially mental health tech, I think it attracts a lot of people who are lived experience experts, right? And so I think you can sort of fall into that trap of like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to succeed, and it's going to validate all the pain that I went through, right? It's going to be the thing that finally, fixes me, or like, heals that wound, right? And I think it's such a dangerous trap, especially for mental health founders. And what's been so interesting, and as I've started to be able to like pull out of my experience, like being in my experience and actually observing my experience as a founder and observing my experience as somebody who's also going through depression and also dealing with anxiety and also needs the product that I'm building. Being able to observe that process has been really interesting. And as a result of that, I think my attention's really started to shift away from, like, I know that, like, as weird as this sounds, Tether being successful is not ultimately going to make me happy, right? What is going to make me happy is my relationship that I have with my work and the relationship that I have with the company. And I think it's so important, especially when you're building a community platform, that you need to definitionally be of service to the members of your community. That is why you exist. You don't exist without these people who want to continue to come back and come back and come back. And so you need to really reframe that piece from something where it's like, I'm doing this because I want to succeed. And I think a lot of founders have this, right? Where it's like they, something happened, or they have just like this burning desire to succeed. They just run hot in some kind of way. And I'm like that. I'm very intense. Like, I get into something and I'm totally an all in kind of guy. And I think at some point that has to shift, right? And you have to start to look at this from like, how am I actually making people's lives better? How is what I'm doing an act of service to the people that are in my community? And I think that shift really can actually have, and this is what we all want, right? And this is what we all do. We're like, man, if I start that company, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be fun to build that thing. And then you get into the weeds and you're like, holy shit, this is a lot more than I'm biting off a lot more than I thought I could chew, right? First of all, my mouth is full. I can barely breathe. But then once you start to get back and this into this sort of playful relationship that you can have with work and form that healthy reframing of like, you know what, I'm not here to drive myself to do something. I'm here to play. And once I think, something comes into the company building process and comes into the entrepreneurial process that feels playful, and if you can get to that point, I think that's a really rich area. So I'm just noticing that transition for me right now. I definitely wouldn't say that like I'm fully there. I mean, some days, it still feels like work. Some days it feels purely like play. But I think the biggest shift for me right now is that I notice the difference, and I can slow down when I notice that I'm in like a place of resistance, and I can just be like, that's interesting. Why is this coming up? I can play with that, and then I can return into flow. And so that's been this is personally, like, this is not Tether related, but this is just my relationship with it, because ultimately the company is its own consciousness, its own entity, right? Yes, I started Tether. Yes, it is a child of mine in some way, but it has its own thing. It's going to grow and develop in ways that I can't foresee, because I'm not a mystic. As much as I'd like to be one and I'd like to be able to see the future, I'm not a mystic. It's never going to happen. So you have to like almost let it go into the world a little bit, and then learn how to play with it and not control it so much. So that development has been really interesting and rich for me.
I have to say, I'm slightly disappointed. Your publicist told me that you were in fact a mystic, and we were going to get to leverage some of your mystic powers today. So I'll take that off the show notes.
Oh, so like I should not bring the sacrificial goat in from the other room. I should just leave it there.
I mean,
selling the mystic thing. I was just soft selling it.
Okay, we under promise, over deliver, I think is what we like to say.
That's the whole foundation of being a mystic in magic, right? It's just
right.
It's like,
right.
Yeah, you show up in some shabby clothes with a backwards hat, and then all of a sudden you make the host of Mandate disappear. Like that. That's how you do it.
That would be something. I think it briefly happened earlier when my camera shut off.
Yeah.
So that was fun. So I'd love to know for you. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you haven't always had this relationship with work. And I say that because, I don't know, most people that I talk to have a hard time separating themselves from their work and kind of having that executive function of being able to sort of zoom out and see like, oh, this is what's happening, or this is why I'm doing it. We're all just kind of so busy and overwhelmed and being in it all the time.
Yeah.
I know that you're kind of in the middle of that transition right now, but what has helped you be able to take those moments of like, oh, I need to start rethinking my relationship with my work?
Well, I mean, first of all, realizing that the relationship that I have with my work now is actually not something that I chose. It's something that I was very much programmed with. And it's not like, I mean, this is not like very much like, this is like, isn't nefarious programming. Like I had, evil people in my life that was like, we're going to really screw this kid up. And it's just going to feel absolutely agonizing for him to do anything. And let's just see what happens. That like, it wasn't anything like that. It was very much like, I think it was the culture that I grew up in, right? Very much like, an achievement-based culture. And my parents wanted what was best for me. And, they knew that the way for me to get to that place of being self-sustaining and successful, which all came from a place of love, happened to do with performance, especially in school. And I don't think that that's very different from a lot of people, especially parents that are professionals themselves. And both, like, my mother's a lawyer, my father's an accountant, right? So they're both professionals, right? And they know, especially my mother. My mother is the hardest working human being I've ever met in my entire life, right? But it was like, it was always that you had to work hard, right? That it was effort, right? And all of that type of stuff. And then you're also programmed, once you start to get into the startup space, you hear the stories of like working 18-hour days and not getting any sleep and working, 1 week straight, and like, people who are popping Ritalin and, what I mean? All of this kind of stuff, just, and worse, and like, other drugs and anything that they can do to get that kind of edge or like to push themselves forward. I think there's like this really unhealthy hustle porn thing that is going on right now that is endemic to startups in the startup world. And you just like, those are the stories that sell, right? It's like the guy who worked 100 hours straight to get his product released, and then it blew up, right? And so we make that look sexy, right? And we make beating ourselves into the ground seem like it's the only way to be successful. And then that's just reinforced by the people around you because they've bought into it. And so it happens very naturally, and it's very insidious in the way that happens. And then, if you grow up like, me, I was fortunate enough to go to a private school when I was younger, because my parents had means to be able to send me there. And it was just like, it wasn't an option to not go to university. That was not a thing that people did. Like, everyone went to university in these things. Everybody got a job. Everyone was expected to be a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, like something, a director. Like it was just like, that was the floor, right? And so that sets a really unhealthy thing. And it also starts to put labels on, if you are this, and this, then you are a success. We can check the box. You are valid as a human being. Please go forth and now be happy. But don't be happy until you get there. And you should really work hard to get there, right? So it's all of these things. No one ever has to say any of this. It's in there. It's in the system, and it just happens naturally. And so I always felt like I had to, beat myself like a rented mule in order to succeed. And it worked for me for a very long time. Like, after high school, I mean, I was like totally like all about partying, and I really craved validation in high school. I was bullied a lot as a kid, and so I just wanted to be part of like that in crowd. And that was like, it was drinking and partying and like, doing what I had to do to like feel like I was part of that circle. And then when I went to university, it went very much the opposite way. I spent 2 years in university as a complete and utter disaster. I went to Western Ontario. I have some great stories, but I don't really remember much of those 2 years. But then when I went to U of T, I was like, okay, I've blown this opportunity at Western. Now I'm actually going to buckle down, right? And it was the same thing, the same ferocity with which I pursued, friendships and partying, and feel like it was all to fill this hole. And then I just shifted that to work, right? And so I ended up graduating top of my class at U of T, which is the largest university in Canada. I also was concurrently doing my CFA, which is my Chartered Financial Analyst designation, as an undergrad. So I was doing double duty, and I wanted to make sure that when I came out of the box, when that starting gun went off after I graduated, that I was shooting up that ladder, right? I was going to wear, I was going to wear nice suits. I was going to have a nice car. I was going to be making six figures. It was just like, there was no way that that was not going to happen. But again, coming from a really unhealthy place where I needed those things in order to feel like I was okay. And I think that a lot of us run into that, where it's like, we are using success, we are using our ventures, we are using whatever it is to fill a hole within us that doesn't feel whole. For me, a lot of that came from bullying trauma. I've dealt with, anxiety and depression my entire life. And that really got bad, as you mentioned, in 2018 after my best friend passed away, which in a lot of ways was the first catalytic event that led down to this series of events that ended up, having me start Tether. So, I think it's really important for people who are watching this and are trying to really explore their relationship with their work, because I mean, you and I have kind of talked about this in a bit of a roundabout way. It's like, when you decided to do Mandate, or when you've decided to take on projects, or when you're deciding where you're going, like, my inclination from you is that you were doing that because you wanted to experience joy and passion, and connection to the work that you're doing. We want it to feel meaningful and purposeful, and that's just not possible if we're just like constantly beating ourselves. We need to be able to give that rest, to be able to like actually appreciate it, right? Like, you don't actually appreciate a meal when you're scarfing it down. You appreciate a meal when you take a bite, sit back, you actually like see what does it taste like in your mouth, like what are the flavors there. You actually take your time with it. And I think, the idea of speed and shipping and all of this kind of stuff when it comes to tech startups, it actually is like anathema to actually savoring the experience of building a company. So that doesn't mean that I don't work long hours, you know what I mean? But I'm actually like, I'm taking more breaks in the day. And by a break, I just mean like, I'll sit with myself on my couch or what have you, or go outside and just be for 10 or 15 minutes and just breathe, right? And not, trying like, okay, thoughts coming in, I need to do that. Okay, cool. Like letting that move to the side and having that relationship with it, and coming back to things when I feel centered and grounded is so important. And I'm just starting, I think, to kind of peel back the layer on what actually feels good, because it's in like, when I'm all about, I got to get this done, I got to get this done, I got to get this down, work can be torture, because with a startup, you're never ahead. Like, it's not a place that exists in startup land. Ahead is just, it's not an entity. You're always behind. There's always more that you can do. So you better get good at having a relationship with that. Otherwise, it's just going to feel like, like you can never do enough. And that was like where I've spent a lot of my time building Tether, is like, I never felt like it was enough because I didn't feel like enough, and there was always more to do. And so that, I think it got to a breaking point for me where it's like, this is not going to be the joyful, exciting, amazing experience that I planned this out to be when I decided to start this company, especially a company around mental health. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I almost should have seen this coming, but, but it's like, how can I really enjoy this? How can I savor this experience? How can I let go of the outcome that I think needs to happen in order for this to be a success or a useful experience for me? Like, how can I just like actually enjoy that? And I think, everything is really about pleasure and enjoyment, right? So if we're not enjoying, like, this is like really enjoyable. This does not feel like work to me. This isn't work to me. Like, writing emails earlier wasn't work to me because I was genuinely enjoying it. It becomes play. It becomes creative. The word work sort of like drops away. It becomes flow. And that's where I think, like, that's where the richness of this experience comes in. And I don't have a hack for being able to do that all the time. I'm still playing with this, but like, I just think highlighting that relationship that we have with work is so super important, especially when you're dealing with your own mental health, your own sense of well-being. And then, obviously me building a mental health, startup, this is so important to me personally. So, yeah.
What helps you take those breaks throughout the day to kind of give yourself rest, or reframe it as maybe not as a break, but as necessary work that helps you be more effective in other areas? Because I know for a lot of people, myself included, it can be hard to, there's always that email to send. There's always that person to follow up with, that thing to go and check, thing to finish up, wrap up and do, when it's like, you know what I really need? I'll give you an example, actually. So today I was working for some consulting client that I was working on, and I was building out these like training scripts for this AI that we're building. And I was like 2 hours into it, which is probably an hour and 15 minutes too long, according to the research of what you should be spending on a task. But I was just like jamming on it in the zone. And then I was kind of like slowing down. And I paused for a second. I was like, oh, I'm kind of exhausted. I think I need to take a minute. And so I went and laid down, and then I ended up taking a 45-minute nap. And it was like, it was awesome. But a year ago, Adam, I wouldn't have done that. It just would have been like, okay, I'm just going to switch to something else that feels easier for my brain to take on at that point in time. And then, 7, 8 o'clock hits, I eat something crappy for dinner, and then I crash, and then I go try to do it again the next day. It's just not sustainable. So how do you, what helps you take those breaks?
I think like exactly what you're saying, which like what you're saying to me is like, you listen to your body, right? You evaluated what your cognitive capacity was. You had the awareness to say, oh man, I've been doing this for like 2 hours. Like, am I enjoying this anymore? But what was really cool about what you said, right, is like when you were you said jamming on it for 2 hours. And like, to me, what that feels like is like, I don't have a sense of time. Like, I'm so engrossed in it that it's like time fades away. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like play. It feels like creation. It feels like that's what I'm like when I'm jamming on something, music's going, I've lost complete track of time. That feels good, right? And so what I would say is like when it stops feeling good, that's when you actually need to take that break, right? And so for me, there's a couple of warning signs that I have. If I'm starting to get irritated, that's a great sign. If I'm starting to get overwhelmed, that's a great sign. If I'm starting to think about how the fuck do I turn this into a $1 billion company 5 years from now, that's a bad sign. Now, there's times for you to actually have those like thoughtful, big picture things, but like for the most part, it's like push it to the side, right? But like when I'm like concerned about that and like, oh my God, like I've got to put this together, and then this has to happen, and then user acquisition's got to be this thing, and like, you know what I mean? Like when you start to get into like putting puzzle pieces together as opposed to working on things, that's when I'm like, we gotta shut it down and reevaluate for a second. And for me, that doesn't mean like turning off and being like rest of the day is toast, right? Actually, for me, it really involves me sitting on my couch, breathing. Like I'll often put a hand on my chest to sort of like connect into my heart space, because that's a really important thing for me, is like, if this is coming from a place of joy, then I need to really connect inward with myself, and just being with whatever comes up. And like, this sounds a bit weird, but I'm weird. So here you go. But like I actually do believe that when my chest is tight, when I'm anxious, when I'm like freaking out, it's actually like there's like this, I visualize like a little boy inside of me who's like throwing a temper tantrum, right? And I'm like, okay, he needs some attention. Like he's freaking out. Like he's throwing shit against the walls. He's drawing with crayons on the walls. We gotta stop this kid. He's gonna lose it. Right? We gotta go pay some attention to him. Right? And he's just like he wants to play. He wants some attention. But like he's overwhelmed and he's scared. And so like I will actually have a conversation. I'll say like, you know what? Like, what do you need right now? Or what are you feeling? Or what do you want to say? And like I'll just let that tape run. Right? But like knowing that it's like I'm not that anxious inner monologue. I'm actually just the thing that's observing it and sitting with it. Right? It's a big point of separation. And even that has taken me a lot of work and effort to know that I'm not my thoughts. But like having that relationship with that and knowing that little boy is just like needs something. Right? And so like I'll give you an example of that. So earlier this week, like we were talking about this in the green room before, backstage, whatever you want to call it. I can see the smirk coming across your face. Like, let's call it a green room. That's what Oprah calls it. That's what we're doing.
Exactly. It's the green room.
Right. So on Sunday, I was feeling this like utter, just like isolation and loneliness. Like we're locked down here in Toronto. Nothing's open. It's winter. it's cold. I live alone. I don't have a partner. So like there's all of these things, right? And like I haven't seen my co-founders face to face. One of them in a couple of months. One of them in, yeah, I don't even remember the last time I saw them face to face because of restrictions. Like you see them I see them every day on a screen, but like that's not the same, right? There's just something major missing, and I was just like really in it, right? And I told you, I was doing this kind of like breathwork class, and it just really activated me, and I just kind of lost my shit, and I wanted to curl up in a ball on the floor, and I just felt like I was sinking into this dark space, and I was like, I can't be here. Like there was something about it. I was like, I don't feel safe in my own home right now, right? Like I need people, I need something around me, I need somebody else. And I was just like, I was really deep in it. And, I was like, okay, I breathed, I sat with it. I called some people that I can count on. And I had those conversations. And then the next day I saw that piece started to come up again. But this time I actually sat with it. And I started to have this conversation. First thing is like, I don't do this all the time, right? Like I am sometimes I actually listen to that piece of that motherfucker up here. I actually listen to him, and I buy what he's selling, and he's a great salesperson, and I am so gullible. I'm like the fish that literally jumps into the boat and gives the fisherman the oar to beat me to death with. Like I'm just like hook, line, and sinker right there. So I believe him. But like today, like the other day, I didn't really believe him. And I just I sat with that. I was like, okay, like, what do you need? And like, what do you want to say? And like, I have it in my journal over there. I wrote a circle down, and I wrote inner child for whatever reason. And then I started to in things, I just was writing down, like, I don't want to do this. I'm scared. I can't handle this. I wrote down everything that voice was saying to me. And then I was like, okay, that's okay. Let's just take a break. We don't have to do anything right now. And I was like, it's okay that you feel that way. I get it. And like, I would literally say, I understand how you're feeling. Like, seems really overwhelming for you. And just that act of because this is the thing. And this is, I think, one of the big problems that people have with their anxiety. It's like, I'm an anxious person, right? You are identifying anxiety with you. I am depressed. Yeah. I mean, there's chemical stuff that's going on there. Absolutely. And there's also a relationship that we have with that. And there's ways that we talk about it that are so important. Like for the longest, because I was one of those people, I was just like, this is what I say. It's like, I'm just a fucked up person. Like there's just nothing can help me. Right. Like I'm just broken. Right. And when you start to say that enough, our brain is very good at answering, is very good at creating loops, right? That should just get patterned right in there, right? And so if you say that enough to yourself and you don't actually question that voice, it becomes part of you completely merge with that identity, and there's no objectivity, and that's dangerous, right? Because it doesn't matter how good you feel or how bad you feel, you actually shouldn't, in my opinion, identify with either. Right? Like you're never as good as you think you are, and you're never as much of a piece of shit as you think you are. Right? Like there's polarity doesn't, to me, there's never truth in polarity. And so I'll even question when I'm feeling too good and I'm like, man, I feel great today. I'm like, something's going on, right? Like, why do I feel so great? This isn't good. I shouldn't feel great. No, I'm kidding. But it becomes this really interesting dance. And so for me, like tightness in my chest, and this is something that not a lot of men do. Not a lot of men, because we've never been taught how to feel into our bodies. Everything is logical, everything is problem solving, everything is fixing. And that is a very mental driven exercise. And we don't ever drop into our bodies and say, holy crap, my chest feels like it's going to rip apart right now. Right. But, and just noticing that. And then saying, okay, I'm anxious, I'm scared. Like, that's okay. We don't give ourselves permission to do those things because having feelings, struggling, not being able to push through and just get the job done is for some reason, it's inherently unmasculine. I don't know why, and I don't know where we got that. But actually, that is the sign of a man who is not integrated, right, is somebody who is overly attached to the masculine, and there needs to be balance there. You need to also be able to sit with yourself, because it's finding that I don't know, that center, right? And so if you're constantly pushing yourself through, if you're constantly grinding, if you're constantly pushing, you know, you're just going to always feel that same pressure. And so you did a great job with it, right? You listened to your body, you listened to your mind, you took the rest, you came back, you were refreshed. I do the same thing, you know, water, walks, you know, just going outside and just standing outside and like breathing cold air for me is like really, you know, really good. So yeah, I think, but it's like, for me, it's like the biggest switch that I've felt has been being able to notice discomfort, notice negative thoughts, notice the wheels start to spin, that hamster wheel start to go, and then not attach to it, right? And not be like, oh, there's something wrong with me. Oh, there's something that's going to be wrong with the company. Oh, it's like, no. I'm just like, there's like a little boy. He needs a little bit of attention. He's throwing a fit. He's hungry. He's gassy. Something's going on, right? Mostly gassy.
Mostly
right?
gassy.
It's mostly gas. But like paying attention to that and like treating that thing as like, it's like something that you need to care for, right? Just like you would care for your company. Because and this was repeated to me over and over and over again by by mentors and like so many different people. And I was like, they're like, Matt, if you don't take care of yourself, it's not going to work. You've got to put yourself first. And I was like, I can't. I have a community. I have a team. Like, I've got to put them first. And there's this whole thing about like leaders eat last. I think it's the name of a book,
Yeah,
right?
I think you're right.
I think Leaders Eat Last is actually the name of a book. And like that mentality, and it's like, not that like, yes, like when you are in a leadership position, like you do have to make sacrifices for the people around you, and you are in service to the people that work for you. But like, if you're not right, and if you haven't taken like some time to recalibrate for yourself, you are useless to everybody. That's a problem, right? I think the biggest problem that happens at any startup is that the founder, you know, or the founders just, or you know, there's this culture of like, just work until you're dead, right? And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You just work yourself until your company goes under or until you die. And there's plenty of stories of people who have just worked themselves into a grave. And I don't want to be that. I don't want that to be a culture. You know, with Tether, I don't want that to be how we exist. I want it to be a playful, joyful experience that we have. And because I think that really does filter into the product, and it filters into the community. And so like, you are a barometer of the health of your own company. And so if I'm feeling connected and I'm giving myself that space, and I'm giving myself those moments to notice what's happening in my body, like you did, going over to the couch, giving that kid some attention, having that moment, like that's going to, and then when I go back, I get done in an hour what it would take me 3 hours to do. I just like, yeah. It's like hot knife through butter, right? So like, honestly, like, you know, I'll work 12 hours in a day, but because of how effective I can be in those, you know, 8 to 12 hours or whatever I'm doing, like, it's like I'm working 20. Like I'm getting the same amount done. I'm just doing it faster than you. And that's because I actually care about myself. And I'm taking that time, and I'm really just learning this. Like, this is just something that's like in its nascency, and I'm having such a fun time talking about it because it feels a little bit new to me right now. But then it's like, it's kind of like that. I think there's a saying, like, it's like, you know, there's like struggle, and then like, it's like sudden enlightenment, where it's like, you just have that kind of moment where you're like, oh, I get what they were trying to tell me this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I get why I need to make breakfast in the morning and not just drink coffee and have a few almonds. Okay, I get it. Right?
Well, it's kind of like I was telling you earlier, you know, it's Sunday, I was having a wacky Sunday too. And my wife was trying to do her best to ask me questions and really dig into it. And I was like, my brain's just not coming up with answers. Slept on it, did my morning routine, talked to another friend. He asked me almost the same exact questions. And then like stuff started clicking, and it was like, oh, okay, yeah. Sometimes we just can't brute force our way through this stuff. I'm curious. I know that you describe it as you're kind of just now figuring this out, but I also know that you've been on this journey for a little bit. And you've done therapy, you've done medication, you mentioned some experimental stuff, you've done group stuff. Now you're starting a company. Like, what do you think has worked? What hasn't worked? What have you learned from all these different experiences so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really good. Oh man, I would say the biggest thing, and then I'll break down a few different layers of this, but it's like it is a journey. Like, honor the journey. And my co-founder Addison always tells this to me. Actually, really good example. We were in a group last Tuesday night. Yeah, last night. It's Wednesday. Everything blends together, Anyways,
yeah,
we were in this group last night, and we co-host a men's group together, right? And so, like, we're both in the work, which is really nice. And I was talking about this feeling of like, oh man, like, I feel like I can really do this on my own. Like, I feel like I don't need therapy right now. I feel like I don't need this. Like, and I'm throwing this all aside. And he's like, pause, right? He's like, I appreciate that you're feeling, really good about what's going on right now. And I love to see this. But like, what if at some point in the future, therapy becomes necessary for you again? He's like, what I am seeing right now is that based on this mental structure that you're creating, it's like that you would frame that needing to go back to that as like some kind of a regression. Right? And he was totally fucking spot on. Right? Absolutely 100% spot on. The way I was framing it was that like, oh, it's like I've like graduated, which is like total crap. Like, there's no graduation from all of this. This is a relationship in depth with yourself, right? And that requires different things at different times. So like, I mean, I've done psychedelics, I've done like psychedelic assisted therapy, I've done 4 different types of medication, I've tried therapy, like talk therapy, and within talk therapy I've like done gestalt work and like this type of therapy and that type of therapy. I've done coaching, like I basically I've done energy work, I've done past life regression. I mean, I can like I forget.
What is past life regression?
Where you literally get into a hypnotic state and somebody who like can channel like where you've been in past lives and like is just connected to that plane will start to pull things out of you. That's a whole wild story. I did that in Thailand on Koh Samui at this resort with this guy who was like an $800 an hour channeler. And anyways, it was a very interesting and wild experience for me. But here, I'll give you a second to kind of come back on right now. I think we're having a few challenges with the live stream right now. I would keep talking, but it looks like we've lost Adam for a moment.
Adam's back. Here he is.
Perfect. I felt like I went into host mode there for a second.
I mean, you can handle it clearly.
We were talking, and I was like, and I think we've lost Adam, so we're just going to take a moment, and now we're going to go and talk to our spot. And here's a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode brought to you by Tether for Men.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I thank you. I absolutely. I would love to have Tether be at the beginning of every single one of these episodes. I'll send you our reel. So yeah, I mean, anyways, that experience was like a totally wild thing. It was in Thailand. It was wild. Like if I believe in the universe. I totally believe in energy. I believe in all of those types of things. I definitely believe that we've been in some kind of a past life in some way, shape, or form. And it was just one of those experiences that was wild. But anyways, point is, I've done a lot of different stuff, right? And the mindset that I had around it was that one of these things was just going to snap something into my brain, and all of a sudden I wouldn't have any bad thoughts. I would have no negative emotions. I would have no challenges. I would be like, again, like essentially a robot, right? Like, but like a really happy robot that has no challenges and can just like, turn shit into glittery pixie dust. And it's just like everything was going to turn out fine for me. And what's interesting is like this actually roots back to my childhood, and I think a lot of people have this. It's like when I think we can pathologize this idea that we're a problem to be fixed, right? And that mental health is a thing to be fixed. right? And it's like, if you just take this pill, if you just go to therapy, you won't have to deal with anything. You'll be fixed. And I think that idea of fixed is actually the thing that keeps more people sick than anything else. And it's kept me sick for a lot of years because I was always going to the next thing. It was always the next thing that was going to fix me, the next thing that was going to fix me. And one of the things that I've only started to really learn is developing that relationship with my emotions, how they ebb and flow, and allowing that to be okay. Like it's not, there is no end game for me. And so I actually don't think you need to do as many things as I did. In fact, I would actively encourage you not to do as many things as I do. Obviously, when it comes to mental health, family doctor, consult with a professional. Psychology was huge for me. It really cracked the things open. I went deep into it. Men's groups have absolutely been the most transformative thing for me. I mean, it's why I'm creating a men's peer support community. That was really the big thing that flipped the script for me, right? And I know that the reason is because it was kind of my first taste of not feeling like I was a problem to be fixed. So like I mean, after one of my best friends passed away in 2018, like I was like KO'd, right? Like I was on mental health leave from work. I wasn't getting out of bed. I was like, my day was, I would wake up at 7 because my body was attuned to it. I would lie in bed for several hours. Eventually I would go make coffee. I would smoke a few cigarettes, and then I would go back to bed. And then I would probably get up a few hours later, have some water, maybe eat something, smoke more cigarettes, go lie in bed. But I wouldn't sleep. I was just like in the spiral, right? Just like self-loathing, self-hatred, depression. It was just like, it was really icky and gross and dark. And I didn't want to live, but I didn't want to die. And that was the hardest part. It's like, I wanted to experience joy again. I wanted to come back, but I couldn't live like that. Right. And that, I think, very much created this sort of, it's like, I gotta find something to fix this, right? And men are really, really good fixers of things, right? That's what we're trained to do. We're trained to achieve. We're trained to fix, to protect, to do, to take action, right? Like that. There's very few movies about like a Buddhist monk that just sits there for an hour and a half and doesn't really do much. Like that's not a movie. It's the guy who crossed the Himalayas and fended off the cold and made a fire out of like a tin can and like, you know, a little leaf that he found on the side of the hill. Like it's all about this heroic overcoming of both the internal obstacle and the external obstacle. But if you notice, they always do it by themselves. And that's the big problem. It's that it's a solo thing. And we've created this image that like the ideal man fixes his problems by himself, right? It's like, it's that stoic lone wolf kind of mentality. And that meeting that I had, like I finally got to a place where it's like I was kind of going back to work a little bit. I was like out of bed. I was doing a little bit more, was by no means back, right? Like was by no means back. And a friend of mine who was actually trained to become a psychologist at the time, or a therapist at the time, says like, hey man, why don't you come join this men's group with me? Like, I feel like it might work for you. And I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, I've tried everything else, so why not? I'll give it a shot. And I went, and like, I shared, and like, I didn't say that I didn't want to live, but I didn't want to die. I didn't say it in those words, but that was how I felt. And they knew that. And instead of being like, oh, well, maybe you should try becoming like ketogenic or like, you know, lifting more weights or, you know, I've heard Wim Hof breathing works wonders for, you know, for like suicidal depression. Instead of like going down that place, what happened was they just sort of like, they held space. They allowed me to be there and show up in exactly the way that I was showing up. I did not have to be this. I could be this, and that was okay. And I only know this in hindsight, but that was something that really shifted things for me. Like being able to be seen as like an incomplete, frail, imperfect human being and still feel loved. That's what transforms people. Is being loved through their frailty, being loved in their imperfection. That's actually what can catalyze rapid growth in a person and can totally flip things around. And I think we see that in a lot of ways with like people that I've seen and interact with the community on Tether, right? Like just that acknowledgement that like I see you, I hear you, and I think no less of you for the struggle that you are going through. We need to normalize struggle as something that isn't inherently unmasculine, but is something that is human. And we say that like struggling doesn't make you any less of a man; it makes you human, right? And that is what we kind of live by with our community. But it's so important to acknowledge. You do not have to change. You do not have to be different. You do not have to be the best Adam. You don't have to show up. I mean, I love your pink flamingo shirt, but if you had shown up in like a grungy, like I love you the same, right? That is a great shirt. It's a great shirt. But
maybe I should have just showed up shirtless. That would have been an interesting mandate.
That would have been a different vibe altogether. I would have been like, it's like, all right, well, it's that kind of thing.
This is what Adam does on the first date.
Exactly. Exactly. I was like, man, your wife's a lucky woman.
Choose your words wisely, my friend.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, there we go.
So much fun today with cameras.
I know. But yeah, it's just like that. I don't know, man. I think it's just kind of that. It's like, how do we allow each other to show up authentically? How do we allow each other to show up as fractions of ourselves? I think that's a really good question. And I think that's the humanity in all of this. It's like, and I think that's what people are really looking for, and why searching for a fix, because then it assumes that it's like, well, I'm only valid as a human being if I'm fixed. And that's totally not the case. So this is a very long, windy, thing that I've kind of gone on here. But like, for me, it really was that peer support. It was that genuine, authentic connection with another man who saw me, who felt me, and said, I acknowledge how you're feeling. Let's go deeper into that. And I'm not afraid to show up with you and hold space into because we are like, emotions are like, we're just like totally allergic to them. At least that's how we've been programmed. Somebody shows an emotion and we're just like, oh, yeah, that's great. I mean, oh, my phone's going off. I have to get my phone, right?
Yeah. Like, how about those Maple Leafs?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man, thank you. As an American who lives, the fact that you dropped the Maple Leafs like that, thank you for doing your research. I appreciate that. Very near and dear to my heart. Long-suffering Maple Leafs fan. But yeah, it's like, how can we bring that humanity to it, right? And I think that's what's so powerful about peer support and why it has to be a part of this landscape if we're going to have like an effective mental health solution. Because like, even if everyone could afford therapy, even if everybody wanted to go to therapy, let's start there. Even if everyone wanted to go to therapy, let alone could afford it, there just wouldn't be enough therapists. So like, we've got to, in order to like deal with this, and like, I don't even say contain it, but just like, in order to deal with mental health, like we have to get better at just like literally being okay with people having emotions. Because that's the big problem, is like when we're just like, I'm a little uncomfortable with that, it pathologizes the person. It makes them into a problem. It creates an apart from feeling for them, when really like what we need to be doing is kind of leaning in. And that's why I think, like, honestly, every man should go to a men. It doesn't have to be Tether. Please download the app and like interact with the guys. I think we have a great community, all of that good stuff. But like, I think every man should find something where they are sitting with other men and they are having real conversations and actually bearing themselves, like bearing their souls out. Because like, there is some, but like, this needs to be in a very like, in a safe container and in a safe space. Because when you do that, when a man actually gets seen and gets seen in an authentic way, and in a way that he thinks like, man, if you just saw me like this, you really wouldn't want me around. When he can be seen and held and loved in that place of like, if you knew this about me, you wouldn't want me around. That's the thing that turns people around, in my opinion.
What have you found? So let's say that somebody's not in a men's group, because we can't just all hang out in men's groups 24/7. We have, companies to start, wives to love on, dinners to cook,
Chick-fil-A sauces to create,
puppies to get, all those kinds of good things. what have you found that's helped you create that safe space just in kind of everyday conversations with guys?
Yeah, I think this is another important thing is like, as guys, like we've got to be okay. Like we've got to be willing to ask that question of how you're doing and have the answer come back, I'm not okay. And having some kind of toolkit around that. And there's like organizations like Movember has put out a product that they, it's like how to have a conversation with somebody who's struggling. We have suicide helplines. We have like all of that is like in such an extreme case, like the helplines and things like that. And we've got to be good at just sort of getting it into, getting into these conversations with each other. And actually, one of the most effective things that I've ever found was actually something that I learned when I was working in finance. And it was actually something that was originally, this sounds weird to say, but it was actually something that was initially like a sales technique. Because like as a portfolio manager, I had to raise money. That was my job. I had to be on the phone. I had to raise money. That was what I did. And when I realized the applicability, but this is the thing. It's like in the environment that I was doing it in, I was doing it to like close something. In this environment, what you're trying to do is you're trying to show that you are identifying what the person is saying. You are using their words, and you are then allowing them the space to go deeper, right? So if you like, let's say you said something to me, and you're like, I'm not doing great. Right? Like, this is happening, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And I could say, you know what, Adam, like it really, it sounds like you're struggling. Do you want to tell me more about that? Right? And like actually, but like connecting to that person, like see if you can actually allow that struggle to land in your body and be like, man, if I was struggling like that, if those things were going on for me, that would be really hard. This guy must be going through something. You know what? I'm going to put my shit aside and I'm just going to show up. Right. And it's like, I think we need to be able to make it about the other person. Right. So, that one thing of just acknowledging how a person, and if you can use their words, so much the better. Right. If they're saying it's like, I'm sad, it's like, yeah, I can tell that you're sad. Do you want to tell me more about that? And because as men, we don't feel like we have permission to be open about what we're going through, like to express struggle in any kind of meaningful way. So when you actually give that person permission and say, tell me more about that, but like genuinely wanting to hear more about what's going on, that is such a huge thing for people that most people and definitely most men never get in their lives, right? And then you also have to know that you're in a place to be able to receive what's coming. Right. And know that you can separate yourself energetically from what's going on there. If you're just like, this is the problem, is like we have these things called mirror neurons in our brain. And when somebody else is sad, we start to feel sad. And we just know that we feel sad, but we don't actually know why. Right. But if we know that our brain is actually wired to mirror the feelings of that's why we cry at sad movies. Right. Because it's sad and it's activating something within us. Like if I see that you're sad and you're like, I'm going to get sad. But if I know that that's what you're going through, and I'm just here to be a witness, and I'm just here to hold space, I can actually, and it's not detaching in a bad way, but it is detaching in a way that's healthy, but that allows that person to actually really go into what they need to talk about. And it can be healing for them. So like knowing that like, this is mine, that is yours, and I want to hear more about it. So it's very much building that relationship with yourself, knowing that it's going to feel heavy sometimes. And by the way, if you check in with yourself and you say, I'm not in a place to be able to handle that right now, that's an okay boundary to be able to set with somebody. Right? You don't want just people dumping on you and then feeling resentful. But like honestly, just that one question, but acknowledging how the person is feeling, saying that must be really hard, and tell me more about that. And I think just that alone is like, I mean, I don't really know, because then the conversation is just going to evolve, but it's like they actually feel like you care about what they're going through, as opposed to, yeah, man, that sounds really tough. So did you check out and then changing the conversation, right? Again, the allergy. So just like, tell me more about that, and let them, you don't have to fix it. It's not your job to fix them. It is not your job. It's like, just like, listen, just honestly listen and ask questions, right? Like, and I think, like, you know, for a lot of like heterosexual men, this is what our female partners just want us to do, is ask questions and say, that sounds really tough. Tell me more about that. But we want to fix. It's such a masculine thing. We want to fix. But it applies to our relationships with our buddies. They just don't give a shit about it because they have the same mentality as well. But this is the concept of holding space. Holding space is just being witness to and allowing that to be and not trying to change it. And that's so difficult for a lot of men to do. But when you actually are capable of doing that, it's a superpower, 100%.
What I'm kind of giggling about in my head is the concept of fixing once again, and how it is so powerful to not have to fix something. And I was like, I think about all the guys out there that, you know, have their long list of, well, if they're straight and in one of those kind of relationships, you know, the honeydew list or variations of what that's called. And like, oh, you know, I got all this work to do around the house, yet guys love to fix it and you're trying not to fix it. Try that on with other things. Like, don't feel like you have to freaking fix everything. You can just listen. You can just be there, and you don't have to have the right answer. I know that that's one of the struggles for me as I continue to practice holding the space for other people, is that my anxiety comes from not from feeling it. I'm good with that. It's from feeling, it's from the fear that I might not be able to help them, which implies that they need to be helped. And that goes back to what you were talking about earlier, is this view of like, we're broken, we always need to be fixed, we're not whole, when in fact we're always whole. And there's stuff that we're working on and we're learning about and we're growing as humans, and that's okay. It's okay to be that way because everybody's like that.
Yeah, and also we need help. Just because we need help doesn't mean that we're broken. It just means that we need help. Right? Like, again, that lone wolf thing, that it's like, you know, if you can't do it alone, then there's something wrong with you. That just needs to go. Like, we need to be done with it because it's killing. And in the case of what we're talking about today, it is literally killing men. They're like 75% of the suicides are committed by men. 40% of men say that it would take thoughts of suicide or self-harm before they would actually reach out and get any help. That's fucked up. That's not good. That is not a good thing, right? That is a problem. And men over-index for alcoholism, over-index for drug addiction. Also bad, also very bad things, right? And like, it's just because, in my opinion, there is a lack of spaces that exist where men can share and open up. And we're allergic to holding space for each other. And it's been socialized, literally beaten out of us. Man up, you know, boys don't cry. All of that stuff that you heard as a kid, right? And then Hollywood's made a complete mess of it too, right? Like, I mean, I'm just thinking about, like, what was that Leonardo DiCaprio movie where he's like in the woods and killing bears with his bare hands?
Oh, like,
yeah, The Revenant. Perfect example. Horrible message. Really good movie.
Loved it.
Message. Right? Like, because we love that. We love that hero story. It resonates with something very deep within us, and that's okay. But that's not how to solve everything. And if you are in pain, if you are feeling isolated, if you're feeling like you need help, you can ask for help, and it doesn't make you any less of a man, right? Like, that's the thing that I just want to get across. It's like, there is something very primal about all of that stuff. The hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, like, it is like, it's not just in our civilization. It is in every civilization around the world. And I would actually, you know, encourage people to start looking into mythology and learning where these things come from. But like the hero doesn't actually do it alone. Like, if you actually deconstruct it, like, they needed, you know, King Arthur needed Merlin, right? You know, there's always something or someone, like James Bond needs Q, right? There's always, like, if he doesn't have those gadgets, he's just a guy who knows, like, some cool shit, right? But if he doesn't have the car that fires the rockets, which Q built, by the way, not him, well, he can't blow up that barricade and jump the thing. But, like, we just think it's all Bond, it's all him, right? Like, no, there's people that help you along the way. right? We just don't see it because it's so deeply socialized in us. And so like we need to accept help. And also as men, we need to actually be willing to, to be there for the guys in our lives, right? For our buddies, right? And like when somebody seems like they're just like something's not registering, or they seem like a bit of a shell, like you're picking up on something. Like it's not you, it's them, right? It's not that like, they're just like they're having an off, like maybe they're having an off night, but like, are you really having an off night, or is something going on? Like being willing to ask that question, being willing to be vulnerable. And if they really don't want to open up, don't push them. It's like you can't like we want to be the hero that saves the person, right? White knight syndrome, right? Which is a terrible term, but like,
yes,
it's like, but like that's what it's called, right? This desire to save. And like we can't save people, but we can ask that good question. We can ask that question and actually be curious to hear. And that I think is the big hook, right? It's like you've actually got to want to hear the answer, genuinely want to hear the answer, genuinely want to show up and support your buddy. Like that's so important. It's like otherwise it's like you're like, oh shit, I'm supposed to say this thing, like I don't really want him to say anything, like I don't want him to be like, we've got to become okay with people being emotional. And I think that like that's so foundational to all of this is, again, normalizing struggle, normalizing that people have emotions, being okay with feeling those emotions yourself within you, and first getting to know yourself, first cleaning your own room, first getting to know that inner turmoil and actually getting curious about what all these feelings and sensations are telling you. That curiosity with yourself is going to then allow you to heal and transform yourself, but then also be the type of person that can heal and transform others. And you don't even have to do anything. You literally just have to be there and ask, tell me more about that. That's it.
I love that. I appreciate all those insights. There's so much goodness in there. Let's wrap up and talk briefly about tether. I know we've kind of mentioned it throughout.
Yeah.
And instead of you just talking about it, why don't you share what have you learned so far about building this community, the technology, like what stands out to you so far?
What's really interesting is, like, first of all, community is a massively complex thing to be able to build, right? Like, I thought I would just put like a road sign in the ground and be like, guys, you can share here. And I would just like have people crawling all over themselves to be able to get there. And then like a lot of the moderation and things like that would just kind of take care of itself if we set the right community guidelines and all of that type of stuff. Actually, we have not had very many people get reported because we've modeled behavior. And I think this is the big thing, right? Within any community, there's a set of values that you espouse, and those are in your community guidelines, typically, right? Especially when it comes to mental health and all of that kind of stuff. I think it's essential for founders to actually be in the community themselves. That's kind of what I've learned. And so what I really pride myself on, and what I think, obviously that's not something that can happen forever and ever and ever, but like, I honestly think like I should be checking in on Tether every couple of days and like actually talking about what I'm going through. Like if I'm not taking my own medicine, what kind of an example am I setting for other people in the community? Like I'm saying, oh yeah, it's good for you, but like I'm a little special, right? Like I think it like genuinely has to be something that you want to use yourself, right? And so what I've kind of learned with community, and I know you're having all of these camera problems today.
It's your lucky day, man.
It's a rough day, but we're making this work right now. One of the things that I've sort of really realized is that like community on some level needs to be something where there's a behavior that is being modeled fundamentally, right? You need to actually be displaying the behavior that you want to see permeate throughout your community by yourself, right? And so one of the things that we've done super well, myself and my co-founder Addison, is we've actually modeled the behavior. We've commented, we've replied, we've posted our own threads. we've mentioned that when we're struggling, I have text conversations with like hundreds of guys, right? Like sometimes it takes me a few days to get back to people because it's like, there's a lot of volume, but like I think like it started to become where it's like we can't keep up with everybody, but like there, up until probably 3,000 people in the community, every single person got like a direct message from me or Addison welcoming them into the community. And I'm not talking like an automated message that, just triggers when a person comes in. Like we physically typed all of those messages. Like when we launched our pods program, it was like we didn't have a mechanism on the platform to be able to reach out. We had our email list, so we sent out an email, but then we literally went through and like messaged every single person, be like, hey, we're launching this program. Do you want to join? Hey, we're launching this program. Do you want to join? Answering questions I think the way that we launched was the best example of it. When we launched Tethr, me, Addison, our co-founder, our other co-founder, Burke, sent probably in like a few days, like roughly 3,000 DMs, right? Just like our entire Instagram list, everyone that followed us or that we followed, you were getting a DM. So that was like, I don't know, I think I sent like 1,800 personally in 2 or 3 days. Like you've just got to like put your hands in there and like do some shit that doesn't scale, right? Yep. And like if you want a community to be healthy and thrive, like it's not something that you can just set and forget, right? It's like you've got to be active in it. You've got to be, and like it's like, and that was the thing with the mental health stuff too. It's like you're like, man, I'm always dealing with all of these things, right? Like there's always like sadness, there's always this, there's always like, man, this is really heavy. And where it flipped for me was like when I realized that working with the men in our community and developing relationships was actually healing me. And it was this really interesting and amazing reciprocal relationship where I was getting to build the types of relationships with almost every single man that came into our community that I wish I had had when I was younger. And it was just like, it was by default. They had self-selected to have this kind of a relationship with me. And then by me having a relationship with as many guys as I could that was like that starts to peter out. Right. And that's where it's like scale and scaling is so interesting. And like, that's kind of like the next step in our evolution is like, now how do we scale this? But like, I honestly do think that because myself, Addison, and Burke have actually spent so much time in the community working with people, a lot of that's going to actually, now we're always going to need moderation and reporting and all of that kind of stuff because we have to keep the community safe. We're going to need community managers, all of that type of stuff. That goes without saying. But I think that there's like, because we've actually put our hands in it, and there's enough people that like have seen us model behavior and that continue to, and that have modeled that same behavior. And also, I just think it's something that men are dying for, honestly. Like, it's just like men want a space where they can be vulnerable, open, share as themselves, and not feel like they're being called, some, like not being made to feel inferior because of that. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned. It's like, you've got to model the behavior that you want to see in your community, right? And if you're not seeing the behavior that you want to see in your community, or if things are going wrong, that's your problem. That's not theirs. You need to show up. Like, you need to show up and be the adult and say, no, this is how we do it, right? This is how we interact with each other. Like, you've got to physically show up. And like, it can't just be like vanity, right? Like, it can't just be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna like write a great job kind of you got to actually put some time and effort to it. Like, I've written, like, I can't tell you how many times I've written paragraphs, and I'm genuinely like, I'm into it. Like, I'm actually in there and like I'm into it, and I'm like, oh, and you should read this book and blah blah blah. It's like I'm enjoying that. Like, if you don't enjoy that, then like, don't start it. There's way easier ways to make money than starting a community-based platform. If you're like, because you've really got to like, you've got to want, like, that's got to be something that you love, right? Those conversations, that depth, that's got, especially when it's coming to mental health, that's got to be a thing that you really relish and that you want to be in, that fills you up. And like, being there for somebody, like it actually resonates with something that you're doing. And I've gone in and out of this relationship where I'm like, oh, I love it, it's too much, I love it, it's like whatever. But like, as I've started to like pull back and be like, man, like what I get to do, like I get to have relationships with guys who genuinely and authentically want to be in a relationship with me in the most amazing and healthy way possible. I think all men are looking for deeply connected emotional relationships with each other, and we just don't know how to actually start that process, right? And I think like we don't necessarily always want to get into like, oh man, I'm so depressed, I'm so down. Like sometimes we just want to shoot the shit about hockey, football, art, movies, books, whatever it is, music, whatever it is that you're into. But like we want to know that if we need to go there, we can.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like it's that safety piece. It's that knowing that the person on the other side, it's like if you really do need to go there, it's not going to get weird. It's actually like it's invited. So I think that's my I guess like early naive thoughts on building a community. Or yeah, that's kind of it.
Well, I'm excited to see what comes out of it. I love watching what you guys are up to and how you're iterating and learning. I think everybody look up Matt on LinkedIn. It's really cool what you're doing right now too with your daily updates on your journey and experience in 500 startups. I always love watching those updates. So thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your openness, your vulnerability. As always, you've got a great story and so much energy, and your generosity to share it is infectious. So I appreciate it, man.
Thank you. I love doing this. This has been wonderful. I love this mandate. I just wish I had dressed appropriately again. I feel I just like, it's like when you show up and you're like, man, like when show up on a date with like a woman, I was like, man, you're way better looking than I am. It's like immediately everything's off on the wrong foot. I was like, I got to catch up here. So no, this is really great. I appreciated you like giving me the opportunity, the chance, just to be part of this. I enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, I mean, I think this is, I see this as a friendship, and I hope to be in touch, and I'm really glad that you connected, and this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Thanks again for being here. We'll talk again soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adam.
All right. See ya. All right, everybody, that does it for our show. This, by the way, is the very fancy studio that you don't get to see every single time, because now we're just looking through my webcam. So got a sweet, big, huge light over here, one of those fancy ring lights over here, and just a blank wall behind me. Had some camera troubles, but we made our way through it. So thanks, Matt, for being a great guest and momentary co-host along the way. If you're still here, definitely make sure to go and check out Tethr. What they're building there, like I said, is super special. And I look forward to seeing what's going to go on there. And then, of course, we've got updates that go out every single week, great shows, recaps from last week, and all sorts of other goodies that I kind of find and explore throughout the week. So check that out, mandateshow.com. And that does it for us today. So thanks, everybody, for being here. And we will catch you on the next show next Wednesday.